The JAVAN rhinoceros. Let's start with one of the rarest large mammals on Earth, the JAVAN rhinoceros. This animal is basically the introvert of the rhinoceros family. It doesn't want to be famous. It doesn't want tourists taking selfies with it. It just wants to disappear into the forest and mind its own business. Unfortunately, humans have been very interested in where it lives. The JAVAN rhinoceros was once found across parts of Southeast Asia, but its population has been devastated by hunting and habitat loss. Today, the entire wild population is concentrated in Ujung Kulon National Park in Indonesia, and we're talking about roughly 80 animals. That's it. One population, one location. Imagine if the entire population of your favorite animal existed in one national park. Every disease outbreak, every natural disaster, every illegal hunting incident, every major environmental catastrophe could potentially affect the entire species. That's one of the biggest problems with having such a tiny population. And there is another problem: genetics. When populations become extremely small, finding unrelated mates becomes more difficult. Genetic diversity can decline, and that can make a species more vulnerable to disease and environmental changes. But the JAVAN rhinoceros has one enormous advantage: it's protected, and conservation efforts have helped prevent this species from disappearing. So, although the situation is incredibly fragile, it's not hopeless. In fact, the fact that the species still exists at all is pretty remarkable, because once a species reaches this point, every birth becomes important. Every calf matters, and every adult matters, basically. The JAVAN rhinoceros is living with the world's most stressful family group chat. Where is everyone? The AMUR leopard. Now let's travel from Indonesia all the way to northeastern Asia, because hiding in the forests along the Russian Far East and northeastern China is another animal that has come dangerously close to extinction. The AMUR leopard. And this thing is beautiful. Seriously, look at it. It's basically a leopard designed by someone who said, make it look even cooler. Its thick coat helps it survive the brutally cold climate. Its spots help camouflage it. And it's an extremely capable predator. But for decades, the AMUR leopard had a major problem. There weren't many of them. At one point, the wild population fell to around 30 individuals. 30. That's not a population. That's a particularly ambitious school field trip. The reasons for the decline included habitat loss, poaching, prey depletion, and other human pressures. And when there are only a few dozen predators left, finding a mate becomes difficult. Maintaining genetic diversity becomes difficult. And one disease outbreak can become a disaster. But here's where the story gets interesting. Conservation efforts have actually produced some encouraging results. The wild population has increased significantly from its historic low. Camera traps and protected areas have helped researchers monitor the animals. Anti-poaching efforts have helped protect them. And habitat protection has given them somewhere to live. So the AMUR leopard isn't simply a story about an animal disappearing. It's also a story about what can happen when conservation actually works. The species is still critically endangered, but its numbers have recovered from that terrifying low point, which proves something important. Critically endangered doesn't necessarily mean doomed. It means we have very little room for mistakes. The SUNDA island tiger. Now let's talk about a tiger, but not just any tiger. The SUNDA island tiger. This name refers to tiger populations native to the Sunda Islands of Indonesia, with the Sumatran tiger being the surviving wild tiger population from this group. And yes, tigers are in serious trouble. But here's something important. When you see a tiger in a documentary, it can be easy to think there are lots of these things, because documentaries can show you 5 different tigers in 5 minutes. Meanwhile, those 5 tigers might represent a tiny fraction of the population. The Sunda Island tiger faces many of the same problems affecting other tiger populations: habitat loss, poaching, illegal wildlife trade, human-wildlife conflict, and the fragmentation of forests. And habitat fragmentation is particularly dangerous. Imagine your house, and then imagine someone slowly destroying all the roads connecting your neighborhood to every other neighborhood. You might still have a house, but you're increasingly isolated. That's basically what happens to wildlife when large habitats get broken into small pieces. A tiger needs an enormous amount of territory. It needs prey. It needs places to hunt. It needs places to reproduce. And it needs enough connected habitat to maintain a healthy population. When forests become isolated, the tiger's world becomes smaller. And that's a problem. Because a tiger doesn't understand property boundaries. It doesn't know, oh, that's protected forest. I should stop here. It just follows prey. And sometimes that brings it into conflict with people. And when that happens, the tiger usually loses. The Cross River gorilla. Now we're heading to Africa. And we're meeting one of humanity's closest relatives, the Cross River gorilla. This is a subspecies of western gorilla found along the border region between Nigeria and Cameroon, and it's extremely rare. There may be only around 200-300 mature individuals, according to conservation estimates. And unlike the JAVAN rhinoceros, which is concentrated in one protected area, Cross River gorillas live in several small, isolated populations. And that creates a completely different problem. They're separated. Imagine having a population of hundreds of people, but splitting them into tiny groups, then placing huge distances between those groups and telling them, good luck finding a partner. That's essentially one of the problems conservationists face. The Cross River gorilla's habitat has been affected by agriculture, logging, roads, and other human activities. And because these gorillas occupy mountainous forest regions, even relatively small changes to the landscape can have major consequences. There's another problem too: disease. Gorillas are susceptible to diseases that can also affect humans. And when you're dealing with a population this small, an infectious disease outbreak could be devastating. But once again, there is hope. Protected areas have been established. Conservation organizations monitor populations. Local communities are increasingly involved in protecting habitat. And researchers use camera traps, field observations, and genetic techniques to understand where these gorillas are and how populations are connected. The goal isn't simply keep the gorilla alive, it's give the gorilla a population capable of surviving without humans constantly holding it together. Because that's the real goal of conservation. Not keeping one animal alive in a zoo, keeping an entire species alive in the wild.